Hello and welcome to Mind the Flat. I'm Amy Isles.
I'm Tom Crowther.
And I'm Chris Heffernan.
So, the name of today's episode is Anti-Social Media, ? Love good question mark. And we're going to be discussing what we love about social media, what annoys us about it, and giving a general overview from several different angles. So, we're going to kick off by talking about funny/interesting, hopefully, social media stories. So, Tom, would you like to kick us off today with what social media story can you bring to the table?
So mine doesn't have a great narrative as such, but it's more of like a low key boast.
Here we go.
In 2016, I was followed by Nick Clegg.
Oh my gosh, I remember you saying this.
Yeah, I've got proof. I've got a screenshot that says Nick Clegg follows you. And it was weird because he wasn't leader of the Lib Dems anymore, and he wasn't. There was no election going on, so I was really confused as to why randomly Nick Clegg had started following me.
I like the look of this chap.
Exactly.
I'll give him a follow.
It was quite disparaging because when I actually went on his profile, you can see that he was following like 40,000 people. So it wasn't just this guy's got some great ideas. Let's go for him. Do you
reckon it's like people do on social media to like gain followers? They go and follow a lot of people, as we've done, I suppose. But do you reckon it was one of those to try and gain votes? Like, vote for me, I'll follow you on Twitter.
I mean, possibly not for the votes, but I reckon it was definitely a follow for follow sort of situation going on there.
Oh, bless him.
Which is weird because I'm pretty sure I was already following him anyway. But
worth a try.
What about you,
That's
Amy?
Pretty cool. So, for the most addicted person in the flat to their phone and social media, I could not for the life of me think about a funny story on social media, which is really sad considering the amount of time I spend on it. So I'm going to talk about Edinburgh Fringe, as I talked about last episode. But the show we took up was all about social media and technology, like we're discussing today, really, but just in a verbatim performance. We were looking at the positives and negatives. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Harking back.
So you're the one here that's got the most knowledge. You're going to bring the most to the table with your theatre performance knowledge.
Just start reciting parts of the play. What is technology? I don't think we even said that in it, but
Please do not.
Fair. Go on then, Chris.
So my social media story is that it was through social media that my relationship with Naomi started over 3.5 years ago now. So everything that followed was thanks to social media, you could say, because that is where it all started.
So predictable.
I feel like we're definitely setting up character types in these podcasts. Chris goes on about Naomi all the time, which is lovely, but we're sat here like, oh, for goodness sake, give it a rest.
Oh, thanks.
No, we're not. It is lovely. Tom goes on about politics in Mongolia, and I go on about Edinburgh Fringe.
There we go.
Go on, Chris. Was there anything in particular that kind of about social media that sparked that off? Is there something that maybe wouldn't have happened if you were just writing letters to each other or bumped into each other in the streets?
Well, I mean, if we'd been writing letters, it would have been a long old wait, wouldn't it? The thing is, I think, and this is why I think social media is a great thing, and because I know for some people you think, oh, it's much better to do these things in person, but I think social media and doing it via that actually is a much nicer way for both parties. Because if you were to spring something on someone, you're not sure if they like you or not, and you say, like, do you want to be my girlfriend? Or however you do it, they're in that position of, oh, hang on. They've got to suddenly think of an answer. They could be a bit struck by it. That it really hits you. Whereas, if you get a message, you can look at that message, you can take a moment, you can think, you can probably consider sort of the question. And I think that's, like in letters, you have that time to think. I think through messaging like that, you have that time to think and properly consider what your answer is going to be. So I think in that way, it was nicer that had Naomi thought, actually, no, I think it's much easier to write a message saying, actually, no, than when confronted with it, sort of go, yes, and not mean it, or equally be so scared, you go, oh, no, when actually you meant yes. So I think having that distance through social media is really useful, I think really helpful.
This is true. I think some conversations do need to be had face to face though, because I think a lot can get misconstrued. It is lovely to have that time to think about things, but I think so much can get misconstrued over messages as well, that in certain situations it is better to do things face to face. And also, like, you could, like, with that time, you can also put things off, which I think is not as nice as a face to face conversation. Like, sometimes you'll get a message through and you think, oh, I'll reply to that later. Like, it's a bit of negligence sometimes. I'm a bit of a romantic though. I do like. Not that I'm.
Oh, there we go.
No, I think that's. But this is.
Chris, I think that was a slam.
No, not at all. Like, that's. I'm so pleased that you're. Oh gosh, I feel like I'm treading on eggshells.
But
it is personal preference. Like, for you, that is more. That's a more comfortable way to go about things, and that's absolutely fine. For me, I think. I do prefer. I'm a bit of a rubbish messenger. I'm not very. I'm not.
all you have to message is yes or no.
Do you? Oh, right, so that one question.
Yeah. I'm talking about this specific question. Obviously, I would never propose via message. Just put that out there now.
Will you? What letter you? Marry me.
Heart emoji.
Or just will you and then a picture of a ring. Even worse.
Absolutely minimalist.
Boom, boom, boom. Mind the flat. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, so on to the main discussion. Tom, do you want to kick us off with what you'll be talking about?
So I've been having to think about how anonymity on social media causes all sorts of problems, but also some potential benefits. So first of all, I want to have a look at why maybe it causes like some significant issues, especially on things like Twitter, where a lot of the time it feels like people are just like saying stuff into the void, and they've got like this really strong detachment from who they actually are and the person they're talking to. People can say some quite nasty stuff and some quite intolerant stuff on Twitter, and I think that's a real problem.
Do you think there's like less accountability for your actions online?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, if you wouldn't say this sort of stuff online. Well, I mean, I personally just want to put it out there. I'm not one of these people that goes on Twitter and starts abusing people.
Aren't you, Tom?
But
you're not a troll.
But people that do, I'd be very surprised if they were to do that face to face.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't come up to someone and yell like racist, sexist abuse at people face to face unless you are really, really, really disgusting. And so, I think Twitter kind of allows that to develop more, because you don't know who you're talking to, so you don't feel that obligation, those social obligations to be nice to people, but you also don't feel like the person you're talking to is potentially a real person.
Do you think there's any positives of the anonymity side of things, like to be able to say things that you wouldn't normally say in person in a nice respect?
No, I guess maybe less from the one-to-one interaction, but like things like Twitter have definitely contributed to a lot of the social movements that we see nowadays. Like the Me Too movement wouldn't have existed if social media hadn't enabled it to. Like, you just don't have that kind of medium, and for a lot of people in those instances, I guess anonymity is probably something that's quite useful to them, because they don't want everyone in their personal lives to know these deep things, these really important things, that are these intimate things that have happened to them, but they want people in general to know that these things happen. And so I think that's probably quite a good way of disassociating it, so that it's not pervasive in your own life, but it's out there and people know that these things are happening.
So it's more about sort of how people interact with, in this instance, it's very a Twitter-centric thing. Twitter, as opposed to Twitter itself, sort of inherently having the problem.
But yeah, like, I guess Twitter is just like a medium for putting things out there, and ultimately, like, it does have effects on the way that you can communicate. Like restricting the character count and that sort of thing, like, has some implications on the way that you can go about talking about certain things. But I think, yeah, it's definitely important in terms of like getting information out there that otherwise wouldn't have been distributed. And people like, I can't think of any way that things that are done on Twitter would have been done in the past before Twitter. Like, it really does have an important impact, I think, in terms of like getting that information out there.
But then what happens when that information is wrong or can go unchallenged? So I think Do you think there's that problem of people putting something out there, putting an opinion out there, and if you get enough people following that opinion, supporting that opinion, then you have this infiltration of sort of wrong opinions, and they're not put into a context. Almost Twitter is contextless. How can that mislead people?
Yeah, definitely. And I think like people always go on about how Twitter is important for free speech, but I think there's a distinction there that like free speech in the sense of how it is as a right is like it requires accountability. Like people should have their name to what they say, because if they don't, they can say anything they like and they have no consequence. And I think like free speech inherently has the right to not only say what you want, but to have people to be able to have people reply to what you say, and for other people to be able to reply to what you say. And if they can't do that because you shut them off, then that's not really what free speech is about. So yeah, I definitely agree.
You create what appears to be a free speech activity, but is actually being heavily edited and worked at so that the right message for that person is going out there.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time as well is it's not a debate, it's lots of people saying their part. And it takes a lot of nuance out of things, I think. People are seeing things as either black and white. It's either yes and no. Like the polarization is on the rise, and like the complexities involved and like the intersections between different debates are just completely being taken out of the picture because that doesn't fit within a 280 character limit, and you can't get it out there and get loads of retweets on it, and it's not sensational enough. It's almost like everyone's becoming their own Sun newspaper. Like they've got to get as much drama as they can, or as much a reaction from people as they can, and so things tend to the sensational and tend to the polarized.
So Twitter drives the sensational because the aim of Twitter is to get followers, to get people looking at what you're saying. Yeah,
what's the point if you just say the same sort of things every single time and no one even cares that you're saying them? And if no one's looking at what you're saying, you might as well not be saying them. And therefore, in a lot of people's minds, it's, well, I might as well be saying stuff that's outrageous so that people do see and do pick up and do start to follow.
So as a non-Twitter user, let's try and look at a positive of Twitter. What do you use Twitter for, Tom? Why have you... Because you have Twitter.
I've got to say, I don't really know. Like, I use it intermittently. I mainly use it for... Actually, I think this might be a really bad thing, but I think I use it for news. But for me, it's not about news in terms of debates in the news. It's about information and getting information quickly. Like news that you wouldn't find in the newspaper, things that are interesting to people and things that they've shared and that sort of thing. And I think that's quite interesting, and to collect that all in one place. And then if you want to go further, often there are links to other things and you can chase that a little bit further. But for me, it's just seeing what's out there and kind of gathering what's there.
I guess it's getting people's opinions as well, because like you say, you don't find that in a newspaper. Like you can have a piece of news, and then social media, like rather obviously, shows people reacting to that, and like you can see how your peers react, you can see how celebrities, people you admire react, people you don't like, how they react. But yeah, I think again, positives and negatives, like it can sway you in positive ways, it can also influence you negatively.
I mean, you can take it and look at the past as well. Like there are positive and negatives to the system that we had before. I mean, fewer voices were heard, but the voices that were heard were tended to be more considered and more rationalised, and the debate was more civil because it was face to face. And so it's the kind of toss up between what's more valuable as a society.
But was that more exclusive? That only certain people could get that voice? Only certain people were considered to have reasoned and considered voices. Who is the arbiter of that? Twitter almost offers you can argue how much sort of control there is, but a platform that sort of anyone, if they can be heard, but then it's, as we said earlier, you can only be heard if you're saying certain things very often on these areas. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, it like newspaper journalism as well, especially in the past, but even still very much so today, is quite elitist. And so the range of opinions that most people are being exposed to are of a very specific group of people, as opposed to, again, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the Me Too movement, a much broader range of people, and who have a lot of very important and interesting things to bring to the table.
Yeah, I think that was a very nice summary there. So I think that leads us quite nicely on to Chris. So what are you going to be discussing with us today about social media?
Looking at this need to perform, this need to have an identity and be your perfect self, your sort of ideal self. And I don't think this is something that is particularly new in the sort of scheme of the world. Adverts have always shown us the ideal because that's how you sell something. The problem with social media is the ideal has now come to seem to be the real, and that it's so much closer to home that when you see your say you're at school still, you go home, you go on your news feed and you see images of what your friend has supposedly been doing, the lovely cake they've had, or this couple goals or something. It's suggesting that this is their real life and this is actually what they are because you know this person exists. You've seen them on a day-to-day basis. So you think what they're doing is real, but really it isn't. It's only one side of their life. It is part of their life, but it's only one side. You see jokes about, oh, can we just pause a second while I get the image just right for Instagram? And Instagram-worthy photo. I myself have climbed through brambles down a slope to get the perfect photo for Amy, stood on a bridge with over a waterfall. The Instagram ideal photo. I mean, that was not natural in the slightest.
It's a very good photo though, like fair play to you. I was very impressed with that photo. I think I'm going to hire you as my professional photographer.
Brilliant. I think another thing as well is that, like, in the past, the ideal, as you say, was in things like magazines and on TV and in films, and normal people can't be in magazines and films and TV, whereas nowadays is like it feels like the barrier between the ideal, what the celebrities are kind of putting out there and what influencers on social media are putting out there is a lot more attainable to people because I can have an Instagram account just like this person, and I can post and upload my stories just like they can, so I must be able to be just like them, and so it enables people to feel like they can get into that mindset where they embody that ideal a lot more than they might have done in the past.
I think on the flip side though, to play devil's advocate, there are accounts out there, social media accounts out there, like I follow a fitness blogger and she makes a conscious effort to post the reality of her life, and she's like, look, Instagram isn't perfect. She posts so many like side-by-side comparison photos of like, this is like Instagram and this is what I actually look like on a bad day, and she's so honest in her account. It's really, and I think there should be it's in the minority I think at the minute, and there should be so much more of that. But it's so positive to see that, and I think there is an understanding that Instagram and social media is unrealistic.
See, I think that's what isn't there. I think that is what is lacking in the world of social media. Sort of to give some sort of level of statistics, in surveys that have been done, one by the YMCA, 62% of 15 to 16-year-olds admitted that they felt pressure about their looks because of social media. 35%, this is from a Girl Guiding survey, of 11 to 21-year-olds said they compare themselves and their lives to others online. You'd think someone gets older that changes. It actually gets worse. It's 40% of 17 to 21-year-olds continue to compare themselves to others online and feel that pressure. So I think it's easy to almost dismiss these things as, and especially, it's a young person thing. It's for very young people. You grow out of it. But I think when you've grown up with it all your life, I think that's the difference now. Lots of adults might be able to look back and see, they can see it differently because they haven't been absorbed in that. But if you start age 11, your whole world is on Instagram and that's all you know. That's the only way you know about forging identity and comparing yourself to others. I think it just gets worse. You haven't got that distance.
Do you not think there is that? Do you not think it could be the case that there is that understanding of like, this is fake, this is not necessarily fake but exaggerated, but still feeling like that anyway? Because I see posts on Instagram and stuff and I think, that's not realistic, but it still doesn't stop me thinking, but I wish I could look like that or do that or have that in my life.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and I think like in the past as well, like I think I'm going to be bringing the past in quite a lot here apparently. But like in the past, people still were making comparisons to people. Like it's not like these people have just materialised into nothing. I mean, obviously they are a lot closer to home with social media, like they're your friends and that sort of thing. But I mean, in the past, like you could have had a friend that had lots of nice clothes and like, oh, why don't I have that, and that sort of thing. Like comparing yourself to other people isn't a new thing as such, but I think the intensity definitely has been ramped up. But I guess like the way that people dealt with that in the past as well is like using mediums as like a creative outlet, like using fashion, like the way they dress to show things, and potentially social media is another way of doing that, is to enable the creative side of people in presenting themselves. And you could argue that it is just a new creative medium, like how people present their lives and the way that they take these photos is just another way of dressing yourself up and like doing your makeup interestingly, or wearing like extravagant clothes or anything like that.
I think the key thing with social media is the intensity. That the mental health of young people is worsening, and there are lots of reasons, like exam results, decisions about the future. There's lots of pressures from elsewhere. By no means am I trying to say social media is the root of all these problems, but I think that intensity, the stress that's caused,
and the
from
pervasiveness
that is a big,
as well, like how it is everywhere and inescapable. And I don't think you could, as someone our age at least, I don't think you could live a genuinely connected life anymore without these things. I think it's almost become a necessity, and no matter how much people will push back against that, it's like it's something that we need to have, in order to kind of live a connected life. So.
It's so instantaneous as well. Like you've got your phone on you pretty much 24/7, and like at the click of a button you can see all this stuff and you can post all this stuff. Like as you linked to your intensity point, I guess it is constant.
I guess that like the instantaneous nature of it as well, though, it does have a lot of positives. Like
oh yeah, absolutely.
You can capture things that you couldn't before, like having the ability to share with all your friends as well, and for them to see, like there's the nice side of sharing things. It's like I think that's something that isn't picked up on enough, is that like actually I quite enjoy seeing what my friends are doing and how they're getting up, like what they're getting up to, and a lot of like your close friends, you do know the other things that are going on in their life, and you talk to them about that directly. And I think that's important to know that like that isn't removing that. It might make it potentially harder to deal with, but you're still getting that those two sides of people if they're like people you care about enough.
Yeah, I think that segues quite nicely into my point, which is kind of about this communication aspect of social media and kind of delving into online dating little bit. And I guess it kind of comes full circle in a way, going back to the point we made right at the beginning about the start of your relationship was through social media, and so many relationships start that way nowadays through online dating. Which
I think I should just clarify that I did know Naomi for years beforehand. We'd actually spoken earlier that day. It was just the act of asking the question happened via social media.
The question, not the ring question.
Not the ring question.
Not the ring question.
Yeah, not the ring question. The question before that question.
Right. Okay.
Just put that there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think kind of trying to lift the spirits a little bit now. I think it can be very, very positive. In terms of, I found some statistics earlier. I found these statistics on an American website, so the validity of them is a bit suspect.
What is there particularly suspect about Americans?
No, sorry, I didn't mean it like that. No, I have nothing against Americans.
I'm not racist,
I just went like a really random website, like called. It was on like online dating and stuff.
It was called online dating and stuff. Brilliant.
Okay, but these statistics allegedly say that about a quarter of relationships formed on dating apps are no more than 1 or 2 dates. But relationships that are longer than a year were about 14.7%. and relationships going on leading to marriage or engagements were about 13.6%, which, to be fair, is quite a long amount of time. And there's so many stories of people, like, a bit more of a reputable source here, BBC News article published around Halloween time, and it says that in 2005, so kind of on the cusp of online dating taking off, 20% of same-sex couples were meeting online. By 2010, so this is still 8 years ago, still quite a while ago, it went up to 70%, which is I was so shocked by that statistic, and it is how people meet nowadays.
I guess that's the thing, like, if you don't meet either at school or at university, then like, where else do you meet other than work? And a lot of work relationships don't work because it's a bit awkward and it's hard to escape from being with that person all the time, and so it's quite intense. And so there's a lot less interaction done in like clubs and that sort of thing. Like, not clubs as in nightclubs, but like joining societies outside in the real world.
Well, I think that's what I was discussing this with an older couple I know who I think are in their 80s, and when they were young, you met through Sunday school, youth clubs, and dance halls. They were the places. All children went to Sunday school, even if their parents didn't. Lots of children went to Sunday school. There were youth clubs, and that was large amounts of youth from an area all coming together and meeting. And again, at dance halls, it was conducive to conversation and to getting to know each other, whereas sort of the young people socialising now, going out clubbing and stuff, I don't think is as conducive to conversation and actually getting to know people and making those foundations for a relationship.
How many people do you meet nowadays that say, like, oh, we met in a bar, or like it's on the decrease?
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's almost gotten to the point now where it would be weird to try and do that. Like, to try and start a relationship outside of social media and dating apps. Like, I'm very lucky that I, like Chris, has known my girlfriend for many, many years. And so it wasn't particularly hard because we already knew each other, and so we didn't need to meet online and break that ice. And I think it's definitely better off because of that, because we've been able to kind of organically grow our relationship.
Yeah. Oh, I just sit here feeling all like I have.
Shall I get out the little tiny violin? So let's have a minute's silence for Amy here.
This is so sad.
But I think that is the great thing, that social media and online dating has created a whole new area where you can meet people, and internationally as well. You can meet people from all sorts of different places and really find people that are good for you.
But to play devil's advocate, I've dabbled with online dating, as you guys know. I think you've all been on my Tinder at some point. It's on and off the phone. It's currently off the phone, just put that out there. So anyone listening that's single, my number is no,
literally anyone.
Well, male. I am straight. Let's put that out there. But yeah, I've done Tinder, I've done Bumble, and I find it's still so difficult to meet someone you actually find that spark with. Admittedly, I haven't gone on too many dates from it, but the ones I have been on, there's such a forced nature about it, and it's one of the things that makes me most nervous in life. Like, and I don't know what it is about it, but kind of I always feel sick before I go on a date. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling. And when I'm there, I feel like there's so much expectation to present yourself in a certain way, because you've gone into that situation thinking, right, I've got to make, if you like the person, it's so many things going around your head. It's like, if I like them, then I've got to make them like me. I've got to give a certain impression. And then it's also kind of figuring out, actually, do I like this person? What am I here for? Like, what's in this situation? That's
the thing that I feel quite lucky about with a relationship that doesn't start online, is that I'd already made a bit of a tit of myself in front of Kaylin before we'd met, and so there was no ice breaking to be done, and there was also no presenting each other to each other because I think we already knew who each other were, and so not necessarily in a romantic way, but we really kind of knew each other, and we didn't have to do that because it would have just been a bit fake and we'd have seen straight through it, and so it just kind of took off from there.
But then equally, how much is that the nervousness specifically linking to online dating or just dating? Because even if you didn't have online dating, and say you were in a society, you were in a bar or university, you've still got to approach someone, unless you're thinking sort of out of your friendship group. So obviously for me and Tom, we were friends beforehand, that's where our partners have come from. You've still got to have that initial sit down, that nervousness of, do they like me, do they not?
Yeah, but you two had that as well. I think it's the case of when you meet someone from online dating for the first time, you've met them to specifically go on a date. When you two met your girlfriends, you met them as friends. And like, it would be the same if I met like a friend of a friend. Like, you'd still meet them without that being a romantic situation. And then, as Tom says, it evolves organically. And I think I've kind of come to the point now, as I said, Tinder is currently off my phone. We'll see how long this lasts, but I think I've reached a stage where I've realised it isn't for me. It's never going to work and it's great that it does work for so many people, but for me personally, like, I think I've realised I just can't put myself in those situations because it doesn't work.
Yeah, I don't think that, like, some people are probably naturally more likely to be able to thrive in those kind of situations where there is the pressure to kind of put that performance on potentially. Whereas even though you do study theatre, I think like you're quite like an honest and reflective person. Like, you are yourself a lot of the time, and so you probably would find that quite difficult because you want to be yourself, and yourself isn't sat there upright at a table. Yourself is saying stupid things and having a laugh about it, and so
Oh, thanks, Tom.
That's all right.
Yeah, I think I'm so eager to please as well. Like, especially with people I don't know. Like, I'm so and it's a bit of a curse, I think. Like, I want to make everyone like me. So
has this turned into therapy? I've just realised. Are we now doing relationship therapy for Amy? This has taken a lot.
Let's be honest, this is every day half that.
We could set up an Agony Uncle system, Tom, where listeners write in with their relationship problems asking for our advice.
This is I've just realised that social media is now kind of almost off the table, and we're just kind of helping Amy through this.
Great.
How can we
out there in the world now?
How can we get back onto social media then?
I think the general thing that I'm picking up from all of them is it's being critically aware. It's approaching these with an awareness of these problems. So it's not that social media needs to drastically change, but everybody just needs to have this conversation. Throughout schools, and I read a really interesting Guardian article really encouraging the government to make it part of PSHE or citizenship classes, where people are really learning about it. It might seem silly. Some people might go, oh, I know this. But I think just by talking about it and just being reminded. So when you go online, yes, you can see all about what your friends are up to. And yes, if you're dating, you've got all that. But you know that there is another world. These aren't always everything about people. And it's just finding that balance in how you interact with them. A balance of what you're seeing and a balance in how often it's part of your life.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of getting all of the benefits that come with social media and the immediacy and the kind of the different aspects to that, but also being aware and kind of trying to limit the negative repercussions. I don't think they will ever go away. And I think if your aim was to try and get rid of social media because you thought it was a bad thing, you're like, it's never going to happen. Like, it's here now and it's here to stay. So as you say, we might as well learn ourselves to live with it and teach future generations how to live with it as we go forwards.
And being responsible with it as well. Like, realise it again, kind of taking that realisation of what other people post, but also what you yourself post, and like having that accountability. Yeah,
showing a true reflection of yourself, and if you don't, making it obvious that this isn't a true reflection of yourself. Yeah. Perfect.
I think that's a lovely conclusion.
Yeah, definitely wrapped up nicely, and I think it's not turned into too much of a pessimistic account of social media. I think we've really seen both sides of things.
Yeah.
So to work with social media, you have to be social and have a conversation about it.
Yes.
Look at that.
There we go. So it's not anti-social media We've solved it. We can
Well,
take
that's the
We've solved
problem.
it.
The problem with social media is when it becomes anti-social media.
Wow.
Thank you very much for listening.
If you want to get in contact, you can find us on Facebook. We're Mind the Flat Podcast.
On Twitter, we're at mindtheflat_pod.
On Instagram at mindtheflat_podcast.
And if you want to respond to anything we've said in this episode or suggest a topic for another week, you can head to our Reddit, that's r/mindtheflat, and have your say there, or you can drop us an email at mindtheflatpodcast@gmail.com.